Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into 19th century York. Now, this is a really fascinating time because it's often, overshadowed by the Vikings or the Romans or the medieval stuff.
That's right. People think of York and they picture the minster, the shambles, maybe the
What do you-
walls.
Exactly. But the 19th century, it was a period of massive change, almost hidden behind that historic facade. We're looking at a city that looked like, well, a quiet market town, but was actually gearing up for a huge physical and economic revolution.
It really is a classic case of appearances being deceptive. There's that famous account from a French visitor in 1828.
Oh, yeah. What do you say?
Well, he basically dismissed York, called it a backwater, only 20,000 people. And he noted how other commercial towns were growing enormously, but York hadn't.
Okay, so that sets the scene, doesn't it? York, the sleepy, slightly irrelevant historic town.
Sure.
But was that really the whole story?
Not at all. The facts tell a much more nuanced story. I mean, yes, okay, York grew slower than the big industrial giants, Leeds, Sheffield, Hull, places like that.
Right, the manufacturing hubs.
Exactly. But here's the interesting bit. It actually grew faster than other similar regional capitals, places that relied more on their historic status than on, say, factories. Think Norwich, Bath, Exeter.
Ah, okay. So it's not industrial boomtown growth, but it's definitely not stagnation either. It's sort of caught in the middle.
Precisely. You've got this balancing act. On one hand, the ancient institutions, the minster, the Lord Mayor, all the ceremony. And right alongside that, you've got these really deep modern pressures and intense urban poverty, as bad as anyone in England, really.
So a city of contrasts. What did that look like physically? How did the city itself start to change?
Well, the first big changes involved literally taking apart some of the past to make way for the present. It was quite dramatic.
So if you imagine someone leaving York in, say, 1800 and coming back in 1900, they'd recognize the minster, the walls maybe.
They'd recognize the landmarks, yes, but the city around them
Yeah.
totally transformed. Even the walls, they survived demolition attempts in the 1820s, which is amazing.
Lucky escape.
Definitely. But they weren't left untouched. They were seen as, well, functional obstacles.
Obstacles to progress. Traffic.
Exactly. Traffic and commerce. So they were cut up. The Barbicans, those outer fortified gates, the really defensive bits, they were the first to go.
Right, the Barbicans.
Yeah.
So which ones lost theirs?
Monk Bar, Micklegate Bar, Bootham Bar, all lost their Barbicans between about 1825 and 1835, just sliced off to make way for carriages and carts.
Wow. And they didn't just remove things, they added new ways in, too.
They did. Fishergate Bar, which had been bricked up for ages, centuries actually,
Right.
they reopened it in 1834, purely practical reason. Better access to the booming cattle market nearby.
Makes sense. And Victoria Bar. That was new, wasn't it?
Brand new in 1838 off Nunnery Lane. Again, all about managing the flow of people and goods in and out of the city. Walls were becoming less about defense, more about, well, traffic management.
And beyond the walls, what are the streets, the buildings?
Road building and civic architecture were absolutely key. One of the most dramatic early changes was replacing the old Ouse Bridge in 1820.
The medieval one, with a chapel on it.
That's the one. Had a chapel, even the council chamber on it, swept away. Replaced with a very plain, utilitarian three-arch bridge. History definitely lost out to practicality there.
That sounds very Victorian. That whole mindset of improvement, even if it means clearing away the old.
Absolutely. And you see that really clearly with the creation of Clifford Street in 1881.
Yes, near the castle.
Exactly. That project just wiped out the Water Lanes area, notorious slums, overcrowded, unsanitary, leveled.
And what went up instead?
Grand, solid public buildings. The new magistrates' court, the police and fire station, the Institute of Art, Science, and Literature. It's Victorian civic pride made stone, built right on top of the cleared ground where the poorest lived.
Quite a statement. And they weren't afraid to clear other areas either, were they? For aesthetic reasons sometimes.
Not at all. Two big examples spring to mind. First, Parliament Street. Created in 1836 by just demolishing a whole block of old buildings between the Corn Market and the Butcher's Market. Created this wide, open street.
Right, joining up the market areas.
And the second one, maybe even more telling, is Duncombe Place, right by the Minster.
Created in 1860.
Yes, and they knocked down property specifically to create what they called a fine prospect of the Minster's west front. Basically, clearing the view for a better photo opportunity, you could say.
Spending money just to improve the view of the old cathedral, but framing it in a very Victorian way. Okay, so the physical stage is being set. What about the economy? What really drove the change there? York started the century with small trades, didn't it? Combs, gloves.
Small artisan trades, yes. Linens, chemistry too. But the real catalyst, the transport revolution, no question.
Railways.
Railways, and one name dominates that story, initially at least, George Hudson.
The railway king. Bit of a controversial figure in the end.
Hugely controversial. His financial empire collapsed spectacularly in 1849. But his early influence was immense. He made sure the railway network really centered on York.
And his legacy lasted, even after his downfall.
It did. Because of that early push, York became the headquarters for the Northeastern Railway, the NER, in 1854. That was massive for the city.
Right. So what does that mean in practical terms? Travel times must have just plummeted.
Oh, unbelievably so. Think about it. The fastest stagecoach from York to London. 20 hours. A really punishing journey.
20 hours?
Yeah. By 1871, with the direct Great Northern Line, under 5 hours.
Wow. That changes everything.
Completely. And passenger numbers just exploded. It went from maybe 23,000 people a year traveling by coach to over 340,000 traveling by train annually by the mid-1850s.
Incredible numbers.
Yep.
And the railway didn't just bring people to York, it became a massive employer in York.
The biggest. By the end of the century, you're looking at around 5,500 railway employees in York.
5,500.
Huge number. And about half of them worked in the giant wagon and carriage works they built out in Holgate. Massive site, covered 45 acres by 1910.
45 acres.
Yeah.
Just for building trains. And all those workers needed somewhere to live.
Exactly. That created this huge demand for housing. So you see rows and rows of new terrace houses springing up, especially off Nunnery Lane, near the new station complex, and out towards Lehman Road for the Holgate workers.
So railways reshaping the city, physically and economically. But there's another huge York story from this time. Something a bit sweeter.
Ah, yes. Confectionery and cocoa. Chocolate.
Terry's and Roundtree's.
Absolutely. It's another great example of a sort of traditional food industry transforming into a modern global business. Terry's had been around making confectionery, but they branched into cocoa and chocolate making around 1886.
Roundtree's.
Yeah.
That was the real giant, wasn't it? The Quaker firm.
It really was. And their story is fascinating because it wasn't just about business. Joseph Rowntree Jr., he was driven by social concerns, too.
The temperance movement connection.
Very much so. He brought in new technology hydraulic presses to make a better cocoa powder, less fatty, more palatable. They launched Elect Cocoa in 1887.
Elect Cocoa. I've heard of that.
And they marketed it very cleverly. The slogan was, "More than a drink, a food."
Ah, positioning it against beer.
Precisely. Trying to persuade working men that cocoa was a wholesome, nutritious alternative to the pint, it was very much a temperance product.
Did it work? Commercially, I mean.
Amazingly well. Look at the employment numbers. Rowntree's went from about 100 employees in 1879 to nearly 3,000 just 10 years later.
3,000, just like that.
Almost overnight. They instantly became the city's second biggest employer right after the railways.
So, okay, we've got this incredible boom. Railways, chocolate, the city's physically changing, money's flowing in. But rapid growth, rapid urbanization, that usually comes with problems, doesn't it? A human cost.
A profound human cost, yes. The city's population more than trebled over the century. A lot of that was people moving in from the surrounding countryside looking for work.
And immigrants, too. I know there was a significant Irish influx.
Very significant, especially during the famine years, the 1840s. That had a huge impact on certain areas of the city.
Where did they tend to settle?
Primarily Walmgate. It became a major Irish district. In the 1840s and 50s, something like 40% of the people living in Walmgate were either Irish-born or had Irish parents.
40%. That's huge. Why Walmgate particularly?
Well, with its livestock markets, it probably felt a bit more like the countryside they'd left behind. And many found work linked to agriculture, like cultivating chicory, which was grown nearby. It kept this sort of semi-rural feel, even though it was inside the city walls.
But packing more and more people into these old, often unimproved areas without proper sanitation. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. What was life actually like for the working poor in places like Walmgate or Hungate?
There's a report by a Dr. Laycock from 1844, and honestly, it paints a truly appalling picture.
Oh, bad.
He describes terrible drainage, or no drainage. Accumulated night soil that's human dung just piled up, sometimes borrowed into the streets. Huge dung hills stored right next to the River Foss near Layerthorpe Bridge. Just unimaginable filth.
Grim. And did Laycock connect this filth to people's health?
Directly. He did the calculations. And it's sobering. In the low-lying, working-class parishes near the River Ouse, the average age at death was less than 20 years old.
Under 20.
Under 20. But you go up the hill into Middlegate, a more middle-class area, the average age at death was nearly 43.
Double. Just based on where you lived.
Your environment basically decided if you'd survive childhood. It was that stark.
And the water supply must have been a major issue.
Terrible. People relied on shallow wells, easily contaminated, or they took water straight from the Ouse, which Laycock said was so dirty and turbid as scarcely to be fit for washing, let alone drinking.
Unbelievable.
And there was a specific problem on the whole eastern side of the city. The river fosse, you see, was kept artificially high about 7 feet above its natural level because of the Castle Mills lock.
Okay. So what did that mean?
It meant the drains that were supposed to empty into the fosse couldn't. They were constantly blocked by the high water level. So sewage and waste just backed up into the streets and houses in low-lying areas like Walmgate and Hungate, effectively turning them into stagnant open sewers.
Just horrific. So how did the city government handle this? This was after the big reform, the Municipal Corporations Act of 1835, right?
It was. But the new corporation, the post-1835 one, inherited a huge debt from the old one, something like £21,500, which was a massive sum then.
So they were nervous about spending money.
Extremely cautious. Their priority was paying down the debt, keeping things stable, not launching expensive, large-scale public works, even essential ones.
Like sanitation or policing.
Exactly. Things like bringing the police force up to a reasonable strength. They initially only approved 12 constables for the whole city. These things were delayed because of cost concerns.
12 officers.
Yeah.
For a growing city with these kinds of problems. So what actually forced them to act on the sanitation crisis? Was it reports like Laycock's?
Reports helped raise awareness, but what really forced their hand was national legislation, the 1848 Public Health Act, and, frankly, catastrophe.
Cholera.
York had 2 major outbreaks, in 1832 and again in 1849. Devastating epidemics. It was only after the second one, and under the new act, that the local Board of Health finally started making serious environmental improvements in 1850. The cost of not acting finally became undeniable.
Right. A grim catalyst for change.
Right.
Let's shift gears a bit. What about the intellectual and spiritual life of the city during all this change? We mentioned the Church of England's dominance, but that was being challenged, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Nonconformity grew rapidly. The Methodists in particular were building large, often quite impressive chapels.
And the Catholic population, with the Irish influx.
That surged, too. They built St. George's Church down in Walmgate in 1850, right in the heart of the Irish community. And then later, a much grander statement. The new St. Wilfrid's, near the Minster, built in 1864.
St. Wilfrid's, that's the one in that very ornate French Gothic style.
That's it. Very fashionable at the time. And apparently its tower was deliberately designed so that from certain viewpoints, it looked taller, or at least more prominent, than the Minster's towers. A bit of architectural rivalry.
I like that. And education. How were children faring amidst all this?
Actually, York was a bit unusual here. Compared to many industrial towns, it didn't rely so heavily on Sunday schools just for basic literacy.
Oh, why was that?
Partly due to existing charitable endowments for schools, and also because there wasn't the same huge demand for child labor in factories as elsewhere. So even by 1836, about 2/3 of children between 5 and 15 were apparently attending day schools.
That's surprisingly high for the time. But what about public provision for culture and learning for adults? Did the corporation step up there?
Eventually. But for a long time, it was left to private initiative. The middle classes had their subscription library, a private club, really, and the working classes had the Mechanics Institute, offering lectures and a library.
Right. So when did the city get involved?
Not until quite late in the century. The corporation finally bought the Mechanics Institute building in 1891, and then in 1893, its library became York's first proper, free public library, a big step towards universal access to knowledge.
Finally catching up. Okay, let's wrap things up by looking at leisure. With maybe a bit more free time, thanks to changing work patterns or just needing an escape, where did people go? How do they relax?
Well, for the elite, social life really centered on the new developments around St. Leonard's Place. You had the de Grey rooms for balls and assemblies, the subscription library nearby, and the Theatre Royal.
Did the theater thrive?
It had its ups and downs, but the railways actually helped revive it. They made it much easier for popular London touring companies to visit York, bringing in bigger audiences.
And for the The ordinary folk, the middle and working classes.
New things started appearing. Municipal swimming baths opened in 1879, which must have been welcome. Brass bands became hugely popular. Both Rowntree's and the railway works sponsored their own bands, big source of civic pride and entertainment.
And institutions like the co-op, they were more than just shops, weren't they?
Oh, much more. The cooperative movement was strong in York. Yes, they offered cheap coal and flour, but they also ran savings banks, libraries, reading rooms, educational committees. It was a whole social and self-help network.
Providing things the cautious corporation wasn't, perhaps.
In many ways, yes, filling a gap in the social infrastructure.
So looking back at the 19th century, York transforms from this, seemingly sleepy historic town to a modern city, driven by Hudson's Railways, Quaker chocolate, and finally, these really difficult but essential public health and building projects, often forced by crisis.
It's the century that really forged modern York's identity. Still deeply historic, of course, but now also an economic center, a railway hub, a place of industry. Even if that rapid change, as we've seen, created deep, deep inequalities, the kind of inequalities that Benjamin Seabaum Rowntree would famously expose in his poverty studies at the very end of the century.
Right, leading into the next wave of social reform. Okay, here's a final thought for you to ponder. We talked about Victorian improvement, temperance movements, new respectable leisure options like libraries and brass bands. Yet, when Seabaum Rowntree did his study, he found that for the majority of the working class population, the single most popular place for leisure, the main social center, was still the pub. He calculated there was one pub or beer house with an on license for every 330 people in York.
Wow. Despite everything.
Despite everything. A pretty powerful reminder of where many people still found their community, their escape, and maybe their solace from the pressures of 19th century city life.
Unnecessary escape, perhaps. That's a really interesting point to end on.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into 19th century York. It's been fascinating. And look, if you're planning a trip to York, or even if you live here and want to know more, you really should check out Alistair's book. It's called York Local Knowledge, Must-Do Top 10s in the Vouchers to get them for less. Loads of great info in there.
And it's free.
It is. You can download it for free from the Google Books or Apple iBook store. And of course, if you do need a fantastic place to stay while you're exploring York, do check out House of York Holiday Homes over at www.houseofyork.org.